We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is the General Government Appropriations Subcommittee. And I know we have some people stuck in traffic, but you all have made it. Mr. Johnson's made it here from the governor's office. And this meeting today, we called this meeting to really talk about the implementation of the new Georgia recommendations and what has occurred, what kind of savings that there have been, and I guess the reason for this, the reason we've done this, just as a little background, there was certain recommendations made by the Commission for New Georgia to streamline state government. I mean, I'm just refreshing everybody on this. And to implement those recommendations, there were funds that were put in the budget over the last 3-4 years now. I can't remember, 3 to 4 years. And by putting those funds in the budget, there were a lot more money supposed to be realized as savings by the taxpayers of Georgia. Last year, or I suppose it would have been in the 2008 general budget recommendations from the governor, maybe in the 2007 amended. There were items that were listed in his recommendations that were shown as savings that were realized in those departments, and then also those savings were then, or what were identified as savings, were then made available to those agencies to use for different things. But at least there was something identified. The documents we have this year, there's nothing identified. Now, they raised the questions in the subcommittee of we have promised savings for the taxpayers, but there's nothing identifying them, and we've put so much money into this in order for us to answer questions and be accountable to our constituents, we need to be able to show them the savings that were realized, what we've realized from those investments. So that's why we're here today, really, and that will be the only thing we take up. That's the only thing we're going to take up today. And we have Mr. Sid Johnson here, who I appreciate you coming. If you would come on up to the microphone, and if you would, and I've asked you to bring a list of savings by agency, and if you have that, if you would present that to us. But if you would go ahead and give us an overview, and then we'll give members of the subcommittee an opportunity to ask questions or make comments. I want to make sure I have you right. I believe that would be that one. Oh, who's going to present? Okay. All right, go right ahead, sir. Yes, Secretary Committee would like to ask a question. I would in general like to hold question, but no, you go right ahead.
I
Now,
just didn't know
now, if you have a question that, I mean, anybody who has a question that, you know, you feel like you need to ask at any particular time, we'll go ahead and do it.
But
But,
Board of Regents.
Yes, ma'am, it does.
Thank you.
okay. But, I mean, again, but if you have a question that's pertinent to where he's at in his presentation, I mean, I would ask you to allow us to go ahead and ask a question at that time. Otherwise, I would rather wait until the presentation is finished.
that better? Okay. Should I start all over? Okay. I'll be glad to meet with him privately. Okay. No problem. So those are the savings that we have. Our savings target in the procurement area alone is $135 million, and we are working toward that number. We do have procurement contracts in the pipeline, and I'm aware that Commissioner Douglas is preparing a package to be distributed this afternoon for you to see what is in the pipeline. In addition to procurement, Jeff, if you would change. Another area that we've been looking at is financial assets. We did establish with the General Assembly the first state accounting officer and his office. That office was able to improve the delivery of the Consolidated Annual Financial Report, the CAFR, and it was delivered on time for the first time ever. That was 6 months after the end of the fiscal year, so significant gains being made there. We are looking at streamlined banking efforts and have some technology that we will be implementing. We've had to delay that project because of some of the other technology projects being implemented by the state accounting officer, but we do have plans to continue that project. We are working and have had a particular increase on our receivables in the state, particularly delinquent accounts with the Department of Revenue, so we are collecting a lot more delinquent accounts than we have in the past. Another technology issue that's not a CNG project but enters into this is the PeopleSoft upgrades that the state accounting officer is doing in improving our financial system. So that is another thing that that he is working on. These are some of the areas that we've seen considerable improvement. I'll stop there and be glad to answer any questions that you may have on any of this material that I've shared with you.
Okay, thank you. We have some questions from members of the subcommittee, but before I do, just one question I wanted to, if you would refresh our members, you may have said this, maybe I missed it, but there was a, can you tell me how much we have, the state has appropriated for implementation of new Georgia projects, and then how much, and what was the, first of all, that's the first question, how much have we appropriated? And then second, what was the projected savings that was presented to us by Mr. Barrett originally? I know it was well over $100 million.
I don't know the exact number of appropriations to date. I think it was over $20 million.
Okay.
So a significant investment and one that we're very appreciative of.
And do you recall that projected savings? I mean, it was on a lot of different sheets of information we were given at that time. It's documented what the projected savings would be, and I'm sure that I have it someplace. I know I do, but I'm thinking that originally we were told that the savings would be somewhere in the neighborhood of, I want to say, $127 million.
Well, I know in the procurement area, our savings goal is $135 million.
In the procurement part.
In the procurement area.
Well, then it must have been significantly more than that. The figure that I just gave that was the total. Okay, thank you. We have a question. Who's on 24? Okay, Chairman Royal.
Can you tell me how long the food service contracts have been let at both the cafeteria in this building and over in Twin Towers?
No, sir, I can't. That has not been a part of the CNG, and
well, you'd mentioned the contracts that maybe the new DOT commissioner had initiated prior.
Actually, the statewide contracts, which is part of the procurement effort, would be under the Department of Administrative Services. So those are the statewide contracts in which all agencies can participate in, and even local governments participate in those statewide contracts as well. But individual contracts, agencies to vendors, we would not get involved in that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Another question? I wanted to ask you, it's hard for us to really, it's hard for us to identify the savings, and the reason is they really are not identified to us. And I appreciate you coming and make the presentation, but just a specific question, the $17 million that were realized by selling off state property, would you consider that to be included in the savings, in this total savings we'd realize from the implementation of New Georgia projects?
I would. I wouldn't call them savings. I'd call them proceeds. And I think, and in the broader, I would call all of these things benefits. And the benefits have several categories. One would be savings, one would be proceeds, one would be cost avoidance, one would be program enhancements. So there's several benefits that derive from these projects. Savings would be one little piece of it. And that particular example about the property, I would consider those proceeds.
Well, they are proceeds.
And I would consider them benefits of the CNG because that was a concerted, direct effort that we went out and sought those properties which probably otherwise wouldn't have gotten sold.
Okay. It just seems to me that, that idea, it didn't need a commission on New Georgia to come up with that idea. It seemed like anybody, you could have got three of us together, and or three people out here, and they said maybe we should sell off some property. So I guess I'm not that impressed by that. We have a question, number 26.
Yes, Mr.
Chairman Mills.
Thank you, and I apologize. I left the time I normally do, but the traffic didn't move along as I wish for it to. Couple of questions. One is on the sheet that you'd handed us just now.
Yes, sir.
It says validated savings, and I'm assuming that's savings that you can verify and have quantified.
If I may, can I
Sure.
discuss that just a minute? We put together an internal validation committee, and we wanted to be real sure that what we claimed could be measured and had validity to it, to the measures. And we looked at the formula or the approach in the savings and then what the actual number was. So we want to be real sure in making sure what we were talking about was correct. So we talk in terms of validated savings. That committee consisted of the CFO, the state accounting officer, the director of OPB, the director of implementation, which at the time was Linus or myself succeeding him, and a private sector, Don Edwards from the University of Georgia. So that was the validation committee. So those items that are on that list are those that have gone through that process. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, so a lot of things we couldn't estimate. We didn't have systems to measure them. We didn't have a process in place to measure them, so we didn't validate them.
And that leads to my next question is I noticed your second heading there was available state savings, and so you differentiated between the two, and I was just wondering
No, actually,
what was the difference?
the $21 million figure you see there was inclusive of all state spend. That included federal funds as well as state funds and other fund sources. We netted out the federal funds and other things that weren't state funds and came to that lower figure.
Okay, now
So that's the difference.
if we invested over, and I know we're using round numbers, but if we invested over $20 million in the Commission for New Georgia, and if we saved 21.9, is that the total savings? So I know that you are projecting the savings out because of new procurement procedures. I'm assuming you would factor those in for each year, right?
You could. It depends on how you want to look at it. The 21.9 is an annual savings. The $95 million figure you see, I think, on the second column or the column next to that would be what I call the extended savings, if I understand your question.
Right, and I'm looking back at the this is the 05 legislative session where we were presented examples of potential savings in Georgia, and it was talking about how that it states here that we'll capture cost savings of $135 million in FY06 through FY09. I'm assuming that's accumulated
No, that's annual savings every year.
And if that's annual savings every year, then are we below the benchmark or above the benchmark?
I would say we're definitely below our target. We rolled that out. As you could see, that was a 3-year plan.
Right.
We gave you that document in January of 2005, and it was probably late in 2005 before we started the strategic sourcing. So we're really in year 2 of that plan.
Right. And I guess this is, frankly, where I'm having some difficulties. I'm going to read to you from this document. This is the Commission's findings. The state of Georgia could save $100 million to $200 million a year after 2 to 3 years of sustained work on the $5.4 billion in purchased goods and services covered by our assessment. We believe at least $25 million could be captured after the first 12 months of a focused effort. And I'm appreciative of any savings as a taxpayer. I really am. I'm for running government as a business. But I guess what I'm asking you is, where is the savings if we invest over $20 million, we have a $21.9 million saving in FY 07-08, well, that's about a wash. Then, if your agencies are not making cuts reflective of these savings, then where is the real savings? And I don't, am I missing something here? I'm trying to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can do business because you save, and you, when this was presented to us initially, it was a great list here, and went through potential savings, and it makes sense. You could have a potential savings in machinery and equipment, data, telecommunications, consultant fees, etc. 5%, 8%, 10%, give or take a few. That makes sense to me. Mm-hmm. What doesn't make sense to me is that when we've made the savings, where are the cuts in the next proposed budget? If there is no cut, then there is no savings. We're just talking about semantics on paper.
A couple of responses to that. One is, are we on track? And you mentioned that in year 1 there would be about $25 million savings. We had 21. So that's fairly close to that benchmark. Mm-hmm. As far as the savings equals cuts. You can define it that way, and I would understand your perspective on that. Anytime we free up some dollars, I think that's a good thing, and it can be leveraged for continued operations and improvement of service delivery, which we discussed. And in a lot of the areas, we are increasing our service delivery to the citizens of Georgia. So I can understand your perspective on that.
Thank you. And I guess what I'm looking for is, can you take me to places in agencies where the budgets have been cut due to this, or are we always just extending services and providing more because now we're able to do more with less? I understand that concept as well. Frankly, when this pitch was made to us, at least the way I understood it, was that it would be cuts.
I lost my train of thought. That was not my perspective from the beginning. It wouldn't necessarily be cuts. It would be decided on what we would use the available monies for. We have made cuts. Last year, as I said before, we brought you $21 million. We netted out the Fed funds, and you cut the agency's budget by $10 million. You took that out of the base. So that has happened. There are other procurement contracts being put in place, and as I mentioned, those will be distributed to you today, tomorrow, as soon as possible by the Department of Administrative Services. Where we go from there, we'll see.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question about the streamlined banking? I understood you to say that you're going to, you've got that on hold right now.
Yes, sir.
Because you're working on some other, fully understand that. We were invested in what, about 1,400 different banks throughout the state of Georgia?
About that, yes.
And when we streamline the banking processes, will those state depositories be removed from the local banks in the state of Georgia and then deposited where?
I'm not really qualified to get into the detail of how that program is going to work. Lynn Valinga, the state accounting officer, could probably explain that a lot better. I don't see us going down to 1, 2, 3 accounts in the state. I think there'll still be deposits in many banks. I think what they're trying to do is streamline payroll and some of those enterprise-wide processes using 1 or 2 accounts in those processes. But I'm afraid to get into the weeds on that one because I frankly don't know.
Well, and I appreciate your candor. And where I'm going with this is I don't know this to be fact, so don't take it as fact. But what I have been told is that we're investing state depositories in out-of-state banks because we can get a better rate of return on interest in certain situations. I don't know if that's true or not. If that is true, then you almost get down into a trickle-down economics theory of, are you really saving money if you're moving state depositories out of state into another bank to pick up a percentage point or half a percentage point of interest here or there, when your local banks, which hopefully we would give them first priority, are losing loaning power because they now don't have the assets to back that up, which directly affects development, loans, applications, and I have the privilege of getting to chair the banking committee in the House, and so I'm very concerned about this, if that is true and if that is the direction that we're going.
I can't comment on that, but I'm sure there's a lot that's considered in selecting those banks, so I'm sure they'll consider all those factors.
Well, and I guess even when you take, we're in 1,400 different, and you reduce it down to a few, that means in each one of our districts there's probably several banks who've got a little bit of state depositories right now. But through streamlining these efforts, you're going to be removing that, what I would call loaning power from those local banks, putting it in a more centralized place, which helps the big guys, but the little banks out there, it might not serve too well for them. And I'm very concerned about that. I'm wondering if we're getting into it's almost back to a similar issue that we talked about with the prison commissaries. In our prisons, if you let the bid out to 4 major companies to provide supplies to all the prison commissaries in the state of Georgia, but we currently have over 3,000, Joe? We currently have over 3,000 contracts with our state prison commissaries. Over 200. Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you for correcting me. Over 200. Well, if you go from 200 to 4, that still affects all different small businesses in my community and in our communities where we have small businessmen who may have been supplying. So while you may save a little bit on Sunbeam bread because you got these 4 companies bidding to supply it, in the end of the game, you've taken it away from a small businessman in my community who was paying state income tax on his profits, et cetera, et cetera. It's almost a wash. And what I'm looking for personally is, I just want you to validate to me that this is not a wash, that we've made a good investment, and frankly, I would expect at least half a cut of whatever we're saving in these agencies. I appreciate more services. I can appreciate that, and I can appreciate wanting to reduce the recidivism rate like in our corrections. We're all for that.
I'm convinced that the state is getting a great return on its investment, whether it's in program enhancements or any of the benefits that I've talked about today. It may not translate all of it into budget cuts. There may be some savings, but we are getting a great return on the investment through these projects. We'll continue to work with you and find whatever we can to cut and to offer to you, but let's keep working on that, and as some of these other procurements come out, we'll see what savings are available.
Can I find out, or can someone get me the information about the streamlined banking? Is that just gossip, rumor? I don't want to be part of spreading that. Or are we
We'll
really
be glad to work with
depositing
you
out of
and
state? I'd like to know the answer to that.
We'll be glad to follow up on that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Chairman Williams has a question.
I guess following up on Chairman Mills' concern about the savings and the proceeds and so forth that we've talked about, and I think all is well and good. I think you've shown that. But when it comes down to the end of the day, in reflecting of the budget and what the budgets are for the various departments, we don't see anything, and we have a hard time telling our constituents that we've saved that much money. I think there's some way we need to get a handle on somewhere in a document, and maybe it starts with the governor to reflect those savings or proceeds in formulating the next budget, so we can say, well, yeah, here's where the savings are. It would be good for us to do that, I think, and we're a little suspicious sometimes of where that money gets, especially within the department itself, if they take it and use it for other things. But I think it ought to show if they save it in whatever, telephone or whatever, then I think the next step would be, okay, you save that, so therefore don't come with a budget that doesn't reflect those savings. If you can do it once, you can do it again. So somewhere I think we just need to get a handle on it so we can be convinced that these savings are true savings and not just folded back into a budget we can't find anywhere.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions, comments from the subcommittee? Mr. Johnson, you understand where we're coming from. I'm looking at this first page of the of this particular report you gave us right here, and the last paragraph on there, proposals. This is Commission for New Georgia Governor's Office of Implementation. That's your office. Last bullet on there, proposals for redirection were developed in conjunction with the Office of Planning and Budget, and final decisions were made by the governor. And of course, once he's made those decisions, and we're given the his version of the budget under the revenue estimate that he has made, you know, it's very difficult for us to do much, anything major for the most part under that. So once he has decided to redirect those funds, and I think that's part of where this whole issue, I believe, comes from. I mean, he's redirected them, and that was never our idea of how that was going to be done, because they were always presented to us. If you would spend $10, there'd be, $1,000 in savings to the taxpayer. I guess in a sense it is. It could be considered that, I suppose, but I think it's kind of it's a stretch. And also, I mean, and the other thing, a lot of these, and I think it's good. I think that it's great that the governor, brought these people together, because they were, very sharp individuals with a lot of business background, successful business background, and they brought in expertise and experience. Got together with advice on how we could use a lot of that experience, expertise, in improving government. I mean, I think that's, that was a good thing. I think one thing that might be a little misleading, though, a lot of these things, I mean, over this same period of time, any governor, I mean, if it had been, Popeye, some of these things would have been done anyway. Some of these things would have been done anyway. I mean, So it's a little misleading to me, and I guess the main thing is that we just, this is the general budget or general government subcommittee, and our job and our charge is to, if we have, especially when we have appropriated money, to be able to, for a particular reason, and particularly when we appropriated it to invest in systems that were supposed to bring the taxpayer savings, we would just like to produce, for our taxpayers, a list of those savings. We did this. We used your money, and that's really what we're saying. We used your taxpayer money to do these things, to pay people, in many cases, to pay people large salaries. And I don't know how much you make, but I think there's some people in this process who have made a lot of money off this, who have huge salaries. Taxpayer money to do that and create systems and make money for people outside of government through some of these things we've done. So we owe it to our taxpayers and our constituents to be able to go back and say, by using your money to do that, and we promised you, and we were promised that there were going to be savings for you by doing that, that we need to be able to identify those savings for them. And that's where, I'm looking through this, and I know that I appreciate you coming and bringing information, but I'm still not sure. I'm going to go through it again, but I'm still not sure I could actually go back and look my constituents square in the face and say, we've done a really good job with this, and we've really saved you money. I can't tell them that, because we truthfully have not saved them money. We took the money that might have been saved and spent it someplace else. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, having said that, I didn't mean to pontificate. Are there any other questions or comments, Chairman Mills?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for tolerating my question. I want to make sure I understand this document that you handed out.
Yes, sir.
And on page 3, it has a Commission for New Georgia amended FY 2007 savings. That's where I'm at. And at the top are the headings. It gives the federal funds, the state funds, the total savings, and then the state funds eliminated. The total savings is what I understand through the new Commission, Georgia, money that has been saved. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, then I move over to the next column.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but that total savings should total that 21 million.
Right,
yeah.
On the back. Then when I move over to the next column, it says state funds eliminated. And for the most part, that column is blank, except for in a few areas you have funds in parentheses. Is that saying that's where we actually eliminated? Let me just give one example. The second line, Administrative Services Department of State Administrative Hearings. You had a total savings of $73,630. State funds eliminated there was $51,114. So that was actually a true cut, right?
I'm going to have to ask for a little help on this one. This came from OPB, and Susan Ridley is here with us.
I've got some information I can hand out to you all about what I believe what you're looking at.
Would you, if you would, and this is just for the procedure, if you would go to the microphone, and the reason I ask you to do that, these are being webcast, and if somebody, for those who are listening to this or watching, they need to be able to hear what you say.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. That rule starts at 9, and we're bumping that, I know.
Tell them you're stuck in traffic.
It's a little different with the rules, Chairman. He's not as gracious as you are, sir.
No, anybody needs to leave. That's the reason we had this meeting at 8 this morning. So for those who needed to go to a 9 o'clock meeting, so if you need to go right ahead. We'll be ending. But you did. You were asked the question, right? So
right.
Want to try to give them.
Well, and I want to try to hear the answer.
Okay.
And I'll try to answer you very, very quickly. What Jeff is handing out to you is what actually happened in House Bill 94, the bills that you all agreed to, House Bill 94 being the amended 07 budget, and then House Bill 95, the original 08 budget. The governor did propose redirecting many of the savings in the amended 07 budget, I believe, in the House. original version of that appropriations bill. You all, in large part, agreed with them, but as things developed with the amended budget and you all moved to a slimmed-down amended budget, none of those savings were either redirected or cut. You all were silent in your bill in '07 on the C&G savings. In '08, again, I believe the House considered many of the governor's proposals for redirecting and or cutting C&G savings. The Senate came in and actually cut most of those C&G savings. If you'll see in your document, that shaded column on the far right for House Bill 95 represents cuts taken to agency budgets in House Bill 95 that was agreed to. In two places, you all did agree to redirect some of those savings to a project in pardons and paroles, the Cons project, and in the Board of Regents to the State Health Insurance Plan shortfall for the Board of Regents. So all in all, $7.2 million was cut in state funds, and $3 million was redirected for other purposes. You all did not have to appropriate funds for those new projects. So $10.3 million of the savings was utilized, either cut or redirected in the '08 budget. And the governor has not recommended adding any of those funds back, so this was a cut to the base. So this cut remains in the '08 budget. In the '09.
Well, make sure I understand. But anything that's cut in the '08 budget or any of these budgets, anything that's cut, it goes someplace. So it's either appropriated or goes into one of the
I believe
reserve
this was
funds.
a balancing item. This was one of the ways that the Senate balanced their version of the budget.
Okay, I understand, but I want to make sure people understand. Regardless of what you're saying, there was no money went back to the taxpayers, though. There was one effort to do that, and that didn't work out. Is that correct?
These funds were cut from the '08 budget.
Where did they go?
There was a balanced budget that you all passed.
Right.
So these funds were cut, other things were added.
That's my point, right? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Now, anybody who does need to leave, go ahead. We'll only be here for a few more minutes, but I know Chairman Smith has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was trying to remember, my colleagues need to help me. We had one governor who did a 2% or a 5% cut redirect every year, correct, Governor Miller? And so we saw what's happening to us partly is that our different governors have different styles of how they are managing these budget proceedings. But I think very simply for us as legislators to be able to speak back to the citizens in our district is we had a bill that essentially we agreed to pay with the way of setting up the Commission for New Georgia. So we had that dollar amount. And now we're into the different methods and steps that you're using that's really and truly cut and redirecting. So part of what we have to do is take the cost of implementing this and then showing the benefits that we've received. So as we're looking at all the different sheets of paper, there needs to be some compilation that we can look to and defend what's going on. It's not that this is not defensible, it's just that it's not clearly understood publicly, or maybe even by all of us, but there's just not direct correlation, and so that's what we're trying to get to. For example, this internal validation committee, I think that would be interesting to know exactly how that works, because that is where these savings are being certified, so that might help us to see how are these certified. It was a costly process in the beginning, and probably most of it was technology update. But we still need to have, it's just like our family budget, what it costs us to do something, and then what were the results from that. And so, again, we go, each governor brings their own style of budget management, and so it's just trying to give clear pictures out there. But thank you very much for your presentation. And I, too, have to report to rules, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions, comments. I appreciate you coming, Mr. Johnson. I appreciate everybody's come in the meeting room here today. Members of our House Budget Office, members of the subcommittee. Before we leave, I do have to comment on this, though. You were talking about the customer service, and you mentioned that we were trying to bring our state government customer service up to the expectations people had from outside business.
Closer to those expectations, yes, sir.
I mean, surely you must know that the American people are not satisfied with customer service that they receive out in industry, that has gone down. I mean, the people are sick and tired, and fortunately this is not where we're going to, but people are sick and tired of going to, calling a business and getting an automated answering system or automated call directing system where you go through about 4 or 5 different menus before you might get to somebody, or you might have to leave a voicemail. I don't think that, I think that it's good that we're trying to improve customer service. I would hope that we would improve it to a level that industry would try to come up to. I mean, that's what I have read, that's what I have observed, and I think especially with older people, they don't feel like customer service in industry and outside business is that at that laudable a level, and I would hope we would shoot way beyond that. We do have a question.
Not so much a question, but a comment. I appreciate you coming today, and I know you felt like you were kind of on the hot seat about some things. But out of what we've talked about today, I hope that somehow you can take this and not just hold it, but take what our thoughts and concerns and maybe come up with something that you could come back with us to say, okay, fine, we've heard it, and we can do this. But you've enlightened a lot of things today that we probably didn't know about before, but I'm hoping you can take this back and do something with it that will make us more comfortable about how these savings are realized and how we can justify it to our constituents.
Thank you for saying that, and we'll be glad to work with you. And if I could, Mr. Chair, just to add one thing. We are in, I would say, the middle of a major transformation effort. And I think if the committee would be a little patient, I think you'll see these technology projects get implemented fully. I think you'll see greater and greater benefits. But I would want you to emphasize that this is not just about savings. This is about a transformation of the back office functions of government. It's about putting quality people in place, which we have done. And it's about changing the systems and how the state works together and collaborates across agencies. It's about working with customers and increasing that delivery of service. We did not go into this only to save money. We went into this to transform government and change the culture of state government, which I think is going to deliver considerable benefits, savings included, but all kind of benefits for years to come. And I think, again, we're in about year 2 of this, year 3, depending on which project you're talking about. And I think if we continue to work together, I think you're going to see greater and greater benefits as we move forward.
Thank you. Chairman Royal, I think, has a question.
Well, I'd like to make a comment. When I mentioned the food service earlier, you said that DOAS did that contract. But while you're looking at service and customer service, and I personally think that is a disaster. And then the quality of food that's being offered in the cafeterias, the service especially, I don't know how long that contract is, but I hope that y'all will look in that in terms of delivering service to the employees and of the state of Georgia.
Okay, I do not see any more questions. I surely do appreciate you coming and being willing to sit there and make a presentation to us and answer questions. And
my pleasure.
We really do appreciate that. Appreciate the job you're doing. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, sir.
This meeting's adjourned.